What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one armed madman. And with me today, we've got sci fi and all kinds of other types of books author Mike Bradford. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you. Can't wait to
It's
talk with you.
it's actually Mark.
Mark, oh my goodness. I could start it over, but let's just let my
It's a
stupidity roll with this one. I
you
have
can
your
start.
thing. I have your site pulled up right in front of my face. I'm looking at it on Zoom, and like I have Mark. There's a calendar thing right up in the corner of my computer right now, and I still screwed it up. Now,
That's okay. If you wanna do it again, you can. It's
nah, it's
fine.
fine. We'll get rid of it in post. I'm just kidding. We
There
won't.
you go.
We'll leave it.
There you go. And then it won't make any sense at all. Cool. Yeah, so
So,
hello. Hello
yeah,
there.
it's nice to meet you, man. I'm excited to talk with you today. Your profile caught my eye. I love talking about the future and about writing and about books. And let's just get right into it. How'd you become a writer?
So this happened, I sort of started writing right, after the divorce. So I went through a divorce. I ended up raising my kids full time, which is really unusual. And at that time, I suddenly started just kind of looking in a lot of directions. I mean, it's when I started my business also, the whole Alchemy for Life business, all that stuff, because I was trying to figure out what life was made of and what we spend our time, energy, and resources on. And so and that started a podcast, and then that started writing, and like I just had this creative freedom to just go nuts. And so I started writing nonfiction. I started writing nonfiction. I actually ended up writing four experimental psychology books, and one of them ended up being endorsed by a clinical psychologist. So that was crazy. But that's how I started. And then something really bizarre happened, which switched me over to fiction.
Dude, that's so crazy. Like, I have a similar story. Like, I got divorced and I got hurt. Like, I got electrocuted working on power lines, and I was kind of sitting in my house by myself. Like, I had moved to Idaho with my ex-wife, and none of my family lived here, none of my friends lived here. And I was kind of just like by myself all the time. And I'm like, consuming things on the internet. And like, I like to complain. It's one of my major things is I like to complain. So I started a blog and I started writing just like about what I see in the world. And then one day I was talking to I rent rooms out at my house. So I was talking to a tenant about a movie that I had watched. It's one of the Tremors movies. It was Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell. It was like one of the later Tremors movies. And like I thought it was so funny because like they filmed the movie in the desert, and then they kind of, like, added blue light to it and made it look like snow, and they're all, like, wearing, like, cold weather gear, but they're in the snow, and I thought, like, what would be the pitch of that movie? So I wrote this, like, fiction story about this movie pitch and the guy who did it, and it ended up being this long, funny story that I wrote, and I kind of decided, like, I don't really like writing about news and politics and stuff like that because everybody's doing that, and, like, other people do it better than I do, and I kinda wanna focus on, like, storytelling, and I had an idea for a sci-fi book, and I've been working on that for a very long time. I'm a slow typer. I the whole book's gonna be written with one finger because of the way I have to write, so it's all on my iPad with a predictive keyboard, but I ended up starting the podcast a couple years later, and I kinda just the blog went away because the podcast was just so much easier and better to get your thoughts out than writing to nobody.
Yeah, that's how that works. So I wrote all my books with 2.5 fingers in the way that I type.
Yeah.
I'm not a touch typist. It's just the way that it works, and for some reason it works for me. Writing is I always say that the the way to get engagement online is to either incite fear or anger.
Mhm.
That's how that works. And if you're not willing to do that, or if that's not really what you're about, like you want to provide helpful articles or you want to be interesting or whatever, you're not going to get much engagement. And that's the sad reality, because that's what we're up against with this, the doom scrolling and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
and
So I can see fiction is much more it's much more engaging, and it's much more escapist, and it's fun to have that. It's fun to have the escape when it's done well. And one of the things I struggled with in the beginning was, they were saying that you have to hold the hand of the reader to a certain degree, but I was always very concerned with insulting the reader. I wanted to make some pretty good assumptions about their intelligence, their perception, their ability to absorb things, their want for longevity and threads. I like that there are lots of payoffs in my books that people who pay attention got some tremendous payoffs, and there's a unique feeling you get when you get payoffs in a book. It kind of makes you feel smarter. It makes you feel like I paid attention for a
Mhm.
reason. I knew this was going to happen. This is exactly what I thought. So,
Yeah.
and it's a really cool thing when it's done properly, and most people don't do it properly, sadly, and a lot of them just give it away. And like we were talking about before about offline about the movie trailers and how
Mhm.
movie trailers give everything away and they don't leave anything to the imagination. And I remember when I was in the midst of my Marvel fanboying, going through the whole movie sequence, I thought when the next one came out, I'm like, they could just show a black screen and play music, and I would go because I don't care. I'm I'm involved.
You're
I'm
invested.
engaged. You know.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
invested
I'm
in the
invested.
story, you're
Exactly.
invested in the characters, and you know that you're gonna see the next movie, so, like, why spoil it? This is something, like, I've preached on the podcast a lot, so, like, people probably know my position on this at this point, but it's like, there's just like, for me, I don't watch a ton of movies or TV shows anymore. I'm, like, strictly sci-fi at this point because that's my interest. I'm not really into horror or, drama, or I'm not even really into like the military type stuff anymore either. Like that stuff just kind of angers me because it feels like the warfare states just kind of showing themselves off to the public and making war look cool. So I'm not really into that anymore. But like if there's, like Alien Earth, I just watched that and it was all right. Wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. It was worth watching. And like I I don't need to see the preview on that. It's an Alien, it's part of the Alien franchise. I'm invested in that franchise. I wanna know how it happened. I wanna know backstory. I wanna get the good stuff out of it. So, like, I'm gonna watch that show no matter what. And another thing I've done lately is I wait for shows to run through all their entire season so I can watch it all in a couple of chunks because my memory's not that great anymore. And, sometimes a week later, it's like, wait, what happened last week? It's kind of tough for me to get to. So I just wait for the whole thing to come out at this point.
That's an interesting concept, the whole binge watching thing. And I was new to that when I discovered Stargate SG-1.
Yeah.
I discovered it in its fourth season, and I think it had just moved to sci-fi. And I, as I was saying before, I actually had a great discussion with the executive producer of SG-1, and I told him something, and he kind of confirmed it, and that was that when they moved it to sci-fi and continued, when I found it, I was like, wait, this is great, this is awesome, and to realize that this thing that I fell in love with already had four seasons, that was unheard of. So at the time, I went out and I got the DVD box sets
I
because
have
I'm
it
old.
too.
So
The one with the
yeah,
little Stargate on the front. I have it. Yep.
all the different colors and
Yep.
things. Yeah. So it was really cool to be able to get that and then and continue on with that. So I have up to the season that I believe it ends in, which is in 10, because I'm so I really liked it. And but I actually asked him because he wrote Dark Matter, which is a really great sci-fi,
Yeah, it is.
and um I asked him how he felt about binge watching, and he said he didn't mind, and but for me, which was the reason it's interesting for me, is that when I wrote the Sword and Sunflower trilogy, I had one person who was waiting for the sequel, which is a mirror, to come out, and she read it, and it was less than 24 hours later, and she wrote a review, and I'm like, what? Like, that took a long time to write, and you just sucked that in
Yeah.
in like 22 hours. She's like, yeah, I fell asleep with the book. And then I woke up and I'm like, oh, yeah, the book's still here. And I finished it. I was like, uh, I didn't know how to feel about that. Like, I wanted it to take longer for her
Yeah.
to read it. But, I get it's cool. Binge watching is cool in that it's sort of like this really long movie separated into pieces and parts where you can go to the bathroom and get
Mhm.
snacks. Um, but by the same token, there's really something to be said for the old timey days where you really had to wait till the next week for it to come out. That was
Yeah.
really cool.
And it's different, like, with Stargate is different than, like, TV now, like, when you watch a long series, it's just a long movie that's broken up week by week, where, like, Stargate was episodic. There's a theme throughout the season, throughout the entire arc of the show that you get, like, you'll have, like, an episode that kinda ties in here, and then you'll get 3 or 4 episodes that really have nothing to do with the overall theme. It's just, an adventure on its own that you can kind of get into, and then, "Oh, wait, hey, look, we're gonna catch up with the theme again here and see what the Goa'uld is up to," rather than,
Yeah.
check out the Jaffas for this week, and I loved episodic TV, and, like, I didn't really watch TV as a kid. Like I was a dirt bike racer and I was always outside riding bikes and just having fun. And I didn't really watch TV, so I didn't get into Stargate until I was an adult and I got hurt and I was kind of stuck on the couch for the first time. And man, as soon as I started watching that, I was hooked. And I've watched all of them, and I think a lot of this is, some people get a lot of crap for this, but I thought Universe was very good too. And it was different, it was more real, it was gritty, it was darker, and I felt like it was a good change up, and I was really bummed that they got canceled and weren't able to continue that story. I did hear that I think Amazon Prime made a purchase of, like, MGM or something like that, where they get Stargate Universe, and they're considering a reboot or a continuation, or who knows what they're gonna actually do with it, but I'd love to see, that show. I'd like to see SG-1, any of them, whatever you wanna do with it, just keep it going, right?
I discovered Universe as well, and it was interesting that Dark Matter was actually about what I thought Universe was about. So, Dark Matter is about people waking. It starts with people not having any memory,
Yep.
and that's what I thought that it was. For some reason, from the previews of it, that's what I thought. I was like, "Well, this is kind of cool." It captured all these humans and put it on a ship. What is this about? But that's not what it was about at all. But it was really grittier and darker and kind of depressing. It was
Yeah.
like just a kind of a gray. But I was sort of in that mood for a few months because of stuff going on in my life. So like it fit really well, and I could feel Stargate, but I kind of was like longing for like the happiness and the
Witty
camaraderie of
the
certain things. Yeah.
wittiness,
And like you said, the episodic thing too, because in that case, you were going in a direction. You were trying to find home and trying to find what the ship was about. But in SG-1, you wanted to come back through that to the Stargate, but there were also threads going on. So they somehow pulled off being episodic as well as having big long-term threads at the same time in SG-1. So I thought that was cool. And then I discovered Travelers,
Yep,
which
I've seen
which
that.
was good too, but also depressing in a way. And then I found Continuum recently, which had a big payoff, but it had a terrible big payoff. And then, at least in my opinion, and then I found Dark Matter, and Dark Matter was awesome, but Dark Matter was canceled. They set up all this stuff for the
Yeah.
next two seasons, and then they just got rid of them. They got rid of them in a way that wasn't really nice.
Yeah, and, like, the thing that I really enjoyed about Dark Matter was it kind of, with them having no memory, is it strips away all the bullshit that you pack as a person, your past, your biases, like, all of these things get kind of stripped away, and you're just kind of relying on your base instincts, your personality that has been baked into you, and you
Right.
kind of just have to figure out they had to figure out who they were as people, not necessarily like what they'd done in the past. Like they wanted to know, but you kind of have to figure it out in a different way that I thought was very interesting. I thought it was a
Yeah,
very
I
interesting
loved it.
way to explore characters and to explore like human nature versus like it's kind of like a nature versus nurture thing, right? Like you strip
Right.
away that nurture and all you have now is nature, and you kind of have to figure out who's in charge, what did I do, why am I capable of doing these things, what could have led me, to this spot in my life to where I wake up with nothing.
Yeah, it's a good question of, are you who you are because of your core, or is it because did your experiences change you in some way? And like in Dark Matter, they actually just want to be good, which is interesting. And I did a podcast episode. I do these little 10-minute things on my podcast, and then I do interviews that are about an hour. And one of the episodes I did was, what if tomorrow you knew your mind was going to be wiped? What would you tell yourself if you just had a piece of paper? What would you tell yourself to remember? Just at the core, and you can only tell yourself so much. And it kind of makes you think, what's really important to me? Like, what would I want to carry forward? But imagine forgetting that you were like super upset at
Mhm.
some other person, or that you don't like this or that or the other thing, and it's really only because of an experience. And if you hadn't had that experience, you wouldn't really care and you'd focus on other things in your life. So that's kind of how Dark Matter is too, and it's pretty cool. I love psychological thrillers in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother had Alzheimer's pretty bad when she died, and I remember thinking one day, I was like, "Man," because like, being electrocuted by power lines, like, I had, 14,400 volts go through my brain, and I'm pretty convinced that if they don't, come out with some pretty good, brain medications in the next 20 or 30 years, that I'll probably have something like Alzheimer's or dementia my time. And I had a thought one day, it's like, "Man, what if I wake up one day, look in the mirror and go, 'What the hell happened to my hand?'"
Right, exactly, and you do that every day. Like,
Yeah.
every day you wake up and the nurses are like, I'm sorry, sir," like, "Wait, here's a thing for you to read. We wrote it down for you." So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's cra I think I read something about it was some element that they discovered did some tremendous changes. I mean, they always talk about brain plasticity and all
Mhm.
that stuff, and about, challenging yourself, and I certainly do that, but I thought they did a study recently that said it was either like chromium or magnesium that played a huge role in that, that like literally it prevented it if you had enough of that. And the USRDA is just so messed up. Like
Yeah.
the amount of potassium we're supposed to get is nowhere near what we really should be getting. And then people worry about salt, but you don't have to worry about salt and stuff if you're getting enough potassium because that's what allows you to process it. And so there's just we're just way off on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a guy on the show before that studies like Alzheimer's and dementia, and he came up with I guess it's kind of like a vitamin or a new I don't remember what those things are called, but a
A
supplement.
supplement?
Yeah, a
Yeah.
supplement that's like an aloe extract essentially, like from aloe vera plant. And he had like great results in his double blind studies, and he didn't have a ton of money to work with, but
Oh,
like, with the results that he had, he was like, "Oh, man, like, I'm gonna be able to go to the FDA and and all these different places, and they're gonna give me a ton of money to spend on this because they wanna have a cure for this stuff." And, of course, he quickly learned that they did not want a cure for this stuff. They just wanna medicate you for it so they can make billions of dollars every year rather
yeah.
than cure something and not be able to turn you into a cash cow for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's a pill subscription. Yeah, it's a subscription. It's a forever thing. Exactly, yeah. As many the more forever things you can be put on, the better it is, I guess, so
Yeah,
but
I
yeah.
mean, I always think about, like, one of the things that is interesting about, like, the future would be, like, life extension, and just imagine how much tax dollars they could collect from a 250-year-old person.
Right, and yeah, there'd probably be changes. There'd probably be specific tax rules where certain things would reset at 100
Yeah.
or whatever,
Yep.
things like that. Yeah, there's a lot. It changes society dramatically that people are living longer. When I wrote The Sword and the Sunflower, it's set about 1,000 years in the future, and 1,000 years is about 30 generations. And generations are based on 30 years.
Mhm.
And the reason it's based on 30 years is because that's when people have kids and, they pass on the next generation. It's not the lifespan of people, but it does come into play when you're talking about generations and things. So it affects things dramatically. I mean, you look at Japan and how their birth rate's going down, and then you look at, they have a lot of lonely old people there
Mhm.
now that are just looking for companionship and so forth. And it's surprising that technology hasn't solved it other than like marrying robots. But I'm talking about like positive things like, connecting them up with younger people who would like to have that experience. So it does affect things to have your society living longer. It makes huge impacts that we don't really quite understand or explore quite yet. But that's the cool thing about fiction and speculative fiction, which of course I had to discover once I was writing speculative fiction, which is about the future. So
Yeah.
it is really cool to start planning. So it's a cool thing, but it's a pet peeve of mine. So when people write fiction, science fiction, fantasy, whatever it is, and they introduce something, they don't play it out. They're like, oh yeah, the society has this thing. And you're like, in 6 years, if
Yeah.
we had that thing, it would totally wipe out our need for this, or there wouldn't be dogs anymore, or people wouldn't drive, or, they don't play it out. They just throw this thing in and they go, well, that's how things work now. Well, it wouldn't do that. So it's a pet peeve of mine. And I tried really hard in my books to make sure that I gave longevity to things and thought it out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I can't stand it when I read a book and I just go like, "Well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. You could just do A, B, or C, and that wouldn't happen." Or,
Yeah.
if like you said, if you take this out to the logical conclusion, like this just wouldn't happen that way. Like another show that I thought was pretty good that I like didn't agree with on was this there's a show called Upload about a guy that gets uploaded into like a
I heard
cloud.
about that, but I didn't see it.
Yeah, and so, like, they've got all of these rich uploaded people, and then they've got poor uploaded people in, like, a shittier simulation than the rich people, but they're not
Yeah.
allowed to work. And I just go, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." Like I said earlier, the government wants their tax dollars, first of all, and, like, secondly, like, you could get a ton of work done if you were a computer. Like, one of my favorite series of books is the Bobiverse, We Are Legion, We Are Bob, and that those guys get a lot of work done. And I can't imagine a society going, like we could be more productive and we could, extract more wealth from our citizens, but we're not because it's just not fair. Because, society doesn't run on fair. I think that even people who totally disagree with some of our takes on this type of thing would be like, yeah, I agree. Society's not fair.
Yeah.
There's no
Right.
fair about it. There's none of the people in charge are looking for things to be fair. They're looking for power.
Well, exactly. And never underestimate greed and never
Yeah.
underestimate people searching for power and never underestimate people trying to game the system. And um I mean, Vegas is a perfect example of it, where there's so many safeties in place because even with counting cards, which is a thing you can learn to do, and you're technically not cheating, they look down on that because they know that's a flaw in the system, and you have to be aware of those flaws in your system. But if you don't look at it like a system, you look at it like a linear story. It feels like a linear story. But what I want fiction to be like is to feel like you're immersed in something that you could take a snapshot of that and then go in a different direction because you've laid all the groundwork and the foundation for it.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways you think like how do you I guess like how do you think society's going to look 1,000 years from now? Like overall, what are some of the technologies we'll be dealing with? What are some of the
Yeah.
human issues that we're going to have? Human connection, like you said, with the older folks. Like, where do you see us going?
So if it didn't go in the direction that the sort of sunflower went, which that follows a cataclysmic happening that happens in a few years from now, that sort of gets rid of a large portion of the people on the earth,
Right.
and by that time, a stable medieval society has resprung up, at least where the story starts in Poland, but there's the presence of something that wasn't there before. And that's sort of partial of what happened to the Earth at that time. So if you just say, well, Mark, if you just take it from here and we proceed normally, assuming that we don't hit the great filter on the way, um, it's almost impossible to really think about it because, like, imagining that we'd all carry around our little magic computer years ago would be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Like, even to imagine that, without the invention of the internet, there's all these things that just wouldn't be possible that we wouldn't even think about. I mean, like, we have this Tesla self-driving cars now, robots are happening. Um, I I can't imagine that in I mean, if we're still around in 1,000 years, it's going to look, I would say, vastly different. I mean, because civilization's cyclical, so we're going to get, the pendulum's going to swing back and forth. It can swing into, like, debauchery and degradation and things where we just
Hmm.
have so much wealth and things under our fingertips that we see the worst of humanity, and then we're going to see, or it could swing the other way, and there's separation of people. There's the use of technology like it is even now, just for stimulus and so forth. But we will swing back and forth. Even like now, we're seeing, like, trad wives and
Yeah.
traditional values and stuff push against stuff because it's gone so far in one direction. I see that is a constant back and forth, and that's sort of the self-healing of society in a weird way, where we get really weird and we get really overly unweird, and we kind of go back and forth a lot of times. If you're asking me about technology in general, I do see, there's certain things we have to unlock. If you're familiar with the Kardashev scale, and I'm
Yes.
sure you
Yep.
are, and if um, people talk about us being, a type 1. We're a type 0.01. We are nothing. We are nowhere near a type 1 right now. But if we would somehow approach being a type 1, I mean, that unlocks a tremendous amount of stuff. And like in Star Trek, where they say people don't have to work, but they do for like the integrity and they do for everything else. It sort of works, kind of.
They
I mean,
never
if you
really
have,
explain it though,
yeah,
They just
right,
kinda say,
yeah,
"This is how it
and
is,"
then in
but not how it works.
yeah, and then I wasn't a Deep Space Nine kind of fan. I think I only watched a couple episodes, but like I think they introduced something called Latinum, which is their
Yeah,
money, and they have pressed and this and that and the other thing. So they kind of reintroduced money because it was something you couldn't replicate, I guess. But I mean, if you can replicate anything you want, I think it comes down to space. And I don't mean up there. I mean like, okay, if I can have anything I want, I want a little land.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's only so many, and there's almost so much land here. So if we're interplanetary, then I want I would like to go to another place, another planet, and maybe get a lot of that, or maybe that's Mark World or something like that. So I
yeah,
think that's what it comes down to. Because if you can replicate everything else and everything else is free, it doesn't leave much other than land,
yeah,
which you can't replicate. So
yep.
I think that's something that we're going to see eventually.
I lived in San Francisco for a few years, and that's one thing that San Francisco does not have is they don't have any land. They can only build up at this point. That's the only place to build is up or down, underground or up into the sky. And I remember
Right.
like in South San Francisco and Daly City, there's these really massive like military cemeteries that just go on for acres and acres and acres.
Yikes.
And I used to drive by there with my ex-wife and go, they're going to dig those people up and move them someday because at some point they're going to go, you know what? We want the land. And, right now there's a lot of like boomers and Gen Xers and even some millennials that would go, That's not happening. We're not doing that." But who's to
Yeah.
say that in 50 or 100 or 200 years that people are going to have the same, thought of not moving somebody out of the ground. We did it with the Native Americans all over the place,
Yeah.
and now we look back and go, yeah, that was probably a dumb thing to do, but we did it because we needed the land. And I would imagine that they're going to do the same thing at some point, and whether it's in my lifetime or 1,000 years from now, there's a society's going to come along and go, these people need to be out of here. Like, we need this space, we need this land. And like, one
Well,
of the things that I find interesting about like the type one argument is when you start doing the math on type one, like, I'm an energy guy, I worked on power lines and stuff like that. And like,
hmm,
it doesn't matter what form of energy you're using, they all have heat as your byproduct. Some of them are going to have CO2 and create more heat than others, but even a windmill, even a solar panel, creates heat as a byproduct. Solar panels, you put enough solar panels around the entire earth, and you're going to change the entire albedo, and you're going to have more light that's going to sink into these panels and create more heat. And like, I don't think that we're ever going to be able to reach type 1 status without getting off the planet, because there's going to be a limit to how much energy we can produce down here without heating, to a point where we can't, where wildlife or the ocean can no longer function. Like, I'm not one of these guys who thinks that like climate change is going to destroy the planet in the next 30 years. I think that that's an overblown kind of oversimplification of the problem. But on a long enough time scale, like, heat is going to be a problem. Like, that was something that Larry Niven dealt with in his, known space series of books back in the day. Like Ringworld, these they had the puppeteers, these weird animals that were a prey species that ended up being the dominant species on their planet. They had heat problems on their planet, and they ended up having to move their planet away from a sun and create artificial stars and control the heat output and kind of grow all of their food on other planets because they just ran into a portion, a time where there was just too much heat to operate.
yeah. Yeah, the whole concept of the Kardashev scale is flawed in that it's just all about how much energy you can
Yep.
use and harness, but it has nothing to do really with technology. And I mean, type 1 technically means like even the rainwater coming off your roof, you would
Oh, I
harness
know.
that as it falls, like the wind power, the everything, the movement of every object. Like it's just kind of silly at its core if you think about
It
it.
is.
And I think it's more of what you can do with the energy rather than how much of it you harness. And you're right, getting to type 1 and staying on the planet is probably not going to work. I mean, we have so far to go with just exploration and understanding of physics. And I love the scientific method in that you come up with a theory and you go to all your people that you respect as peers and go, what's wrong with this?
Yeah.
What am I missing? And
Yeah.
that's beautiful because that means science is dynamic. And that's what bothers me when people say, trust the science and things. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you're only trusting something that's transient, until you learn a bit more about it and things like that.
Yep.
So I like that about, the scientific method and what we're learning. And we are going to unlock things like we don't even understand what gravity is. I mean, we
No.
just we just don't. We talk about dimensions a lot, and we talk about alternate dimensions. We talk about shifting to the side to find a different dimension and expansion of the universe and all that other stuff. But there's a lot of flawed stuff that we have. Um, so I do think that we're going to unlock a couple major things, a couple, and gravity would be so much. I mean, gravity would change the paradigm dramatically in every way.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the things that they were wrong about when me and you took science in middle school and high school. I mean, and they would tell you that, I remember I had relatives talking about how, like, when they were in school, like boomers were saying, like, "Hey, doesn't it look like Africa and South America fit together?" And your teachers would tell them, "That's stupid. It's just a coincidence." You know what I mean? And then 10 years
Mhm.
later, it's like, well, yeah, actually, they did fit together because plate
Yeah,
tectonics and all this crap
yeah.
that they didn't
It was
understand. And they'll tell you
Pangea.
that,
Yep.
Pluto was a planet when I was in high school. And,
Hmm.
even with like the James Webb Space Telescope, like they've discovered some weird things so far that they can't totally explain yet. Like one of the coolest things that they've discovered is that when you look at distant galaxies in the distant past, you should have a spin. Half of them should be spinning clockwise, the other half should be spinning counterclockwise. And
Yeah.
they've found that the majority of the galaxies spin in one direction. I don't remember which direction it was, but
Right.
they can't really explain that. And one of the things that could kind of explain this would be black hole cosmology, to where like
Mhm.
every black hole is a white hole on the other side, and a
Right.
white hole is just a singularity, which is no different than the Big Bang, which
Yeah, it's
could
spewed
lead
out
to a
matter and
very
stuff.
interesting, multiverse in a way that's not, I've never been a fan of this. Like, if I decided to have this interview with you today or tomorrow, we're going to split off and have a different timeline. Like, I've never really been a fan of that version of the multiverse. But I do like the idea of like how many black holes are in our universe that could be endless. You know what I mean? And if each
Yeah.
one of those creates a universe that has that many black holes, like you're still going to have a multiverse to where, like, I read a book recently where this guy was, I don't remember his name, Robinson, and Robinson is his last name. Anyways, he's writing these books about like a multiverse essentially, and about simulation theory and all this weird stuff. And he decided, like, hey, look, like if we truly do live in a multiverse that's, unlimited, that infinite multiverse, there's a version of some reality somewhere out there where this book is real. And I thought that that was such an interesting observation, to where, like, hey, this is coming out of my brain. Like, it's something that could actually happen. And it could be, your characters could be alive out there somewhere living in this universe that you created in your head.
Well, that's actually been my concept of the multiverse because I'm like you, where I'm like, yeah, every time you make a decision, it branches off into 8 billion, multiverse dimensions and so forth. To me, I thought, well, what if the only other multiverses are the ones that we've created? Because I'm fascinated with creativity because it comes from a place that we don't
Yep.
understand. Like we're manifesting something out of nothing. The whole genesis of where that book came from, I can't explain. I cannot. It blow your mind. It's crazy. And so I think, well, what if every time you think through a fantasy in your head, whether it's a story or a reimagining of something, or you play something out about a meeting or whatever, what if that's you creating universes every single time you do that, whether you write it down, whether you think it, whatever it is. And I think that's much more fun
Yeah.
than just saying, oh, you had coffee today instead of tea, or you did this, or you
Yeah.
got up at 5 instead of 5:30 or whatever.
Yeah, well, like Philip K. Dix thinks that the Man in the High Castle actually happened. Well, thought, he's no longer with us, but like I thought that that was such an interesting theory. And like I have this weird dream from time to time where like I I was kind of a shithead in my early life. I was addicted to drugs and I did some bad stuff in my earlier years before I got clean. And I have this dream where I'm wandering around in this very large old house, and there's a like a portion of the house that you live in, and then the rest of the house is kind of just like not being used, and there's just kind of stuff laying around everywhere, and you kind of have to go through all these different stairwells to get through different doors. And like I have this dream from time to time, and I swear to you, it doesn't feel like it. And I'm wandering around looking for things to steal is what I'm doing in this dream. And I swear to you, it doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like a memory. But I've never been to this place before. I never lived in this place. And it makes
Yeah.
me wonder, like, if consciousness is some thing that exists outside of our universe, or, exists in it at a quantum state, like maybe I am tied to another version of myself and I'm dreaming about memories that that person has gone through.
So that's a lot to unpack, and that's really cool. So let me go backwards. So the thought about where you really are. I did an episode called "Non-Local Consciousness."
Yeah.
Um, so when we talk on the phone, or right now, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to something on my screen right now that's representing you. Your
Mhm.
consciousness is actually in Ohio, I think you said. So
Idaho.
Idaho. Okay, sorry,
Other eye.
Idaho.
Other eye.
Other, yeah,
Yeah.
flip that
Oh,
around.
Ohio.
So
Oh.
and I thought, well, what if our consciousness is the same way, where this is not where we are at all. We're somewhere else right now. This is just our avatars communicating. There's nothing local about our consciousness at all. And I thought, well, that's kind of a really cool thing to think about. When it comes to dreams, I'm fascinated by dream totems. I'm fascinated by dream avatars and what your dreams represent. And I've come to believe that house dreams are dreams about yourself, and each room represents something. Your bedroom represents intimacy. The kitchen represents change. And then, like, if you're renovating the house, it means you're trying to change yourself. If you have a dream where it's beautiful on the outside but there's stuff missing on the inside, it means you're working on yourself. So my interpretation, not that you asked, is almost like you feel like there's a lot of stuff you want to accomplish, but you're like pushing through getting to it because it's not coming to you the way that you expect it to. So you have to steal it, even though it is
Oh, that's
yours to begin with.
interesting. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I like that. I like that.
yeah,
Another thought that I had while I was doing a podcast with another sci-fi writer a couple of months ago, and we were
mhm,
talking about like telepathy and psychics and stuff like that. And we were talking about this podcast called The Telepathy Tapes, where this scientist claims that she's discovered these people that, these parents can communicate telepathically with their children, essentially, that have like hardcore autism and are nonverbal, but are able
yeah,
to like read their minds. And I was kind of thinking, like, how could you explain that in a way that could maybe be scientific? And then I thought about Roger Penrose, who's a famous physicist, has a theory that consciousness has some sort of quantum aspect to it, essentially. And I have the belief that like consciousness exists somewhere else, like outside of us, maybe in a big well, and we're all just like accessing a tiny piece of this. Like you've got your internet signal, and we're all kind of accessing it through Wi-Fi. So we're just kind of
yeah,
these antennas for different, portions of this consciousness. So if it did have some sort of quantum aspect to it, maybe we're all entangled, quantum entangled in a way. And the closer you are to a person, the tighter that entanglement is. And maybe
yeah.
that could explain why you know when someone's about to call you, or you feel it when somebody dies, because you are actually tied to that person in a physical way.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. That makes sense in a physics way. Like, it really makes sense. I wrote a book called One Self, where I attempted to sort of explain my take on religion, spirituality, or lack thereof. And so I talk about something kind of like that, where we are a part of us exists somewhere else, and all that stuff. I mean, like, you and I could already have known each other for quite some time in that area,
Mhm.
and then we both talked and said, yeah, we should get together, and then the circumstances happened that now you and I are talking.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a really crazy cool thing to think about.
Have you ever heard of the concept of a Boltzmann brain?
No.
So a Boltzmann brain is the idea that like in a truly infinite universe that anything and everything is possible, kind of like infinite improbability issues like Douglas Adams with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And so a Boltzmann
Article.
brain would just be a random accumulation of atoms that actually end up being like neurons, and a brain could just like come into existence out of nothing and
Oh,
maybe
okay.
only for a split second. What's his name? Alistair Reynolds kind of explored this in a short story called Glacier, where these worms are like burrowing through a glacier and it ends up creating like neurons in a brain essentially.
Oh, nice.
And so, like,
Yeah,
one of the ideas for a Boltzmann brain is this thing wouldn't have any physical form. It would only be able to think. And one of the things that it might do would be to dream and to look at its surroundings and go, how can I explore this place where I'm in? Like, I can't do anything. I'm just this entity that exists out here in the middle of nowhere. But, like, I want to know what I'm living in and what this place is. So maybe it would
yeah,
dream a civilization like Earth with all of these little people running around that are doing the discoveries and figuring out what's going on in this place. And that could actually be an answer for the Fermi paradox because what if why aren't we seeing any other aliens out there? Well, maybe the Boltzmann brain only dreamt up one planet full of people.
right, 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 exactly. So, a couple things on that is that Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I
Yes.
think that was the movie that where they talked
Yep.
about his dad was supposed to be a celestial or whatever, but the way that they made it out was that he was just this brain that
Yep.
formed and he just wandered around and finally got formed. So it kind of
Yeah,
reminded me
he
of
was a
that a little
Boltzmann
bit.
brain. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then he ended
Okay.
up being able to create a physical form, but like in
Yeah.
I've read it where it doesn't create a physical form and it has to imagine one, which is super
Yeah.
cool as well, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, and yeah, it kind of, it's almost like we've come full circle about me saying that every time you imagine or write a story, it creates a universe. So you're saying, yeah, that brain creates a universe, and here we are. And right, it didn't decide to make 57 different aliens; it just made us. And the whole Fermi paradox thing is just so fascinating because either way, it's mind blowing. If we're completely alone and we get this entire universe to ourselves and we all get a planet and then some is just mind blowing. Or the fact that there are aliens out there and we've either met them before or we haven't, or there's the dark forest or the zoo or all those forms of answers for it. And they're also, some of them are chilling, some of them make a lot of sense. Faster than light travel just simply isn't possible. Um, we have a ton of civilizations have been out there, but they've come and gone already. So,
Yeah.
or there's some out there right now that are exactly where we are, but they're too far away and we're never going to meet them. I wrote a book called The Status Game, and it was about relationships and how people connect, and I compared how difficult dating was to the Fermi paradox
Oh,
and how,
interesting.
yeah, and I use examples like I said where, like, there's that perfect person out there for you, but she's too far away.
Yeah.
So you're never going to meet her because there's no way to do that. Or there's a person that you meet and she's like 65 and you're 30, and it's, you guys would be perfect, but you're out of sync time wise, and so forth. So there's a lot of parallels to that, and the Fermi paradox is a really fun thing to think about. But we were talking about, like, dark matter is a universe essentially based on just humans, and it all
Yeah.
came from Terra Prime. There was a game I played years ago that was the same way, where they named planets after states, and you'd go to Texas, which was actually a planet, and so forth. And that's interesting too. It kind of tugs at you, like you want more flavor and color out of the universe, but by the same token, it's very rooted in what we already have, which is, as far as we know, we don't have aliens, we just have us.
Yeah, Dune was the same way. Like the only real aliens in Dune are the sandworms, and the sandworms don't think or, build or anything like that. So it's an interesting way to like explore. I really enjoy it when like I'm reading a book right now that doesn't have any aliens in it. It just has people, but over 40,000 years people evolve and change, and some of
Mhm.
these beings are now just as alien as some alien would be. And I think that that's also interesting. I can't remember what it's called, but like there's a version of the Fermi paradox called the interdiction hypothesis, to where maybe civilizations don't expand to other planets and other star systems because of, you know, species drift. If they become alien to you, then maybe you can't control them, and they're gonna be just as much of a threat to you as an alien is. So it might be it might like you said, like faster than light travel just might not exist. I'm always back and forth on whether it exists or not. Whether it's like we just don't know yet, or like it breaks causality, so it kind of can't exist. Like I'm always, up in the air. It kind of depends on who I'm talking to at the time, whether I'm into it or not. But you know, you could have people that look nothing like us, think nothing like us, act nothing like us. You could have different, governing systems. You could have no governing system. Like, I think it would be so interesting to explore, what people could be like millions of years down the road. What would evolution do to us? One of the things I thought about when I lost my hand was like, why are they building just a replica of a human hand for a prosthetic? Why not try something different? Like, we're not the final form of what humans would be. Like, a million years from now, 100 million years from now, we could look completely different if we didn't, mess with our genetics at all. We could look completely different. So, like, one of my thoughts was, it's like, why not move the pinky down and create a second thumb, you know?
Well, yeah, and we're experimenting with that with robots and Tesla
Yeah,
and Unitree and all that. We're there, and they're focusing on the 5-digit hand because they want the robot to do all the stuff we can do. So, like,
exactly.
if we, so all the stuff that's designed for us, so if it's bipedal and all that good stuff. But yeah, I've seen 3-fingered robots from the past that could do, like, they could spin a pencil, they could do everything we could do with far more dexterity. And you were talking about um, humans becoming aliens, and that could be the solution. And imagine you're a child reading a book, your dad's reading a book to you or something, and this is like a million years in the future, let's say, and whatever planet you're on, and you're like, what's out there? Oh, there's these people, these people, these people on this planet, and this. And the boy says, well, where did they all come from? And the dad's like, well, they're all us. Well, they all looked like us. No, they all looked like these people from that planet. And we moved out here. And when we came to this planet, because of the radiation and the cold, we changed over many years. That's why your eyes look like that. That's why your
Yeah,
skin's that color versus those people. And the little boy would be like in disbelief, going, no, 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 we're different people than they are. We didn't come from them. So
yeah.
that would be a really cool way to get human beings to populate the universe and no longer be human beings, because I think that's true. And there were some papers written about stellar travel in which they talked about we would have to mutate
Mhm.
to actually populate other planets. And then we would get there and be like, it would
Yeah.
be really creepy because we get there and these people just wouldn't look like us.
Yeah, I've heard the same theory. They call it like bioforming, to where like you get out there and you realize that it's really, really hard to terraform a planet to make it exactly like Earth. Like you would have to
Mhm.
do so many things and it would take so long. And it would just be so much easier to change your DNA to fit the planet that you're living on rather than changing the planet to fit your DNA. Right.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. That's how I feel about Mars. So, like,
Hmm.
I'm fascinated by Elon and all the other stuff that he's into, and I love that he wants to make us multiplanetary. But, like, there's a lot that's hidden from the public when those statements are made. Like, there's two major things that we would have to overcome on Mars, even if we did terraform it. There is no magnetic field, so you're going to live underground,
Yep.
or you're going to die. And then the gravity thing is just extremely. We hide how destructive that is to the astronauts, and they're dealing with microgravity.
Hmm.
It's not a, oh, you're back home, everything's fine. There's permanent damage done to some systems by being in microgravity, and like we don't, running in a treadmill. Or running or spinning you and using centripetal force to try to like be like gravity isn't enough. So
Yeah.
we have two things we need to solve to actually get life on Mars to be sustainable. And that's just a planet that's in our neighborhood.
And we might find that it's easier just to build space habitats that have spin gravity, Like
Yeah.
that could be easier than populating a planet. I thought that one of the best scenes from The Expanse was when Bobby came to Earth for the first time and escaped from the UN, facility that she was being kept in, and she went out into Earth for the first time and her eyes were jacked up and she couldn't like really get her bearings because she'd never really seen a horizon before. And
Oh,
one of the
wow.
guys on Earth, was like, "Hey, look, like look at your feet and then slowly come up and slowly come up and then you see the horizon for the first time." And it really screwed with her ability to perceive the world because like you said, you're living underground, you're living in a dome, or you're living in a place that doesn't really have a horizon because of the way it is. I think it's really interesting that NASA announced recently that they think they could have possibly found life on Mars. Like they picked the worst day ever to announce it when Charlie Kirk got shot. That's a horrible
Oh,
day
that's
to,
right. They did make an announcement on that same day. Yeah.
yeah, and nobody
I
saw
just
it.
I just
But
heard. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say it's so interesting because like two things could be true. It could be related to us, and that could show that like panspermia is possible. Or it could not be related to us, and that shows that abiogenesis can happen in two different places, which to me, like both of those answers are fascinating. And I'd love to know like what's really going on there. And I hope Elon gets some people down there at some point because like we need to check it out.
Can I tell you that frankly, I don't care?
Yeah.
I mean, I totally care about those happenings. I don't care what it is. I'm so exhausted by the almost, 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 and I think
Mhm.
civilization is already we're ready. Have them come down, have us discover the ancient things on Mars where we press a button and the atmosphere comes back, or
Yeah. Yeah. That'd
whatever,
be
right?
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, all that stuff. The ships, the this, the that. We dig a little bit farther because the archaeologists finally allow that, and we go, oh, that's right. We do have previous civilizations. I don't even care. I don't care what we find. I'm just exhausted by the yeah, maybe kind of sort of thing. So I just because I know it's like right there,
I
and
agree with you. And I love the theory that like we may be from Mars in the distant past and maybe came over here Battlestar Galactica style and got rid of all the technology when we
one
got
of the
here,
tribes, yeah,
right? And like you look at it and we're not really designed like normal animals are on this planet. We don't have any fur. We get arthritis. Like it
we don't
seems like,
belong.
like that theory that gravity is, we're set up for Martian gravity, not Earth gravity, which is why we turn into shriveled, lumps of arthritis by the time we turn
Yeah.
80 years old. Like, I think it's a fascinating theory. I love the theory. Well, I don't love it, but I think it's interesting that they've found like elements on Mars that are created in a nuclear war, not
Yeah,
through,
yeah. There's a name for that where the sand is glass because of
yeah.
that. Yeah, exactly. I've always one of the first articles I wrote on Quora years ago was about um, the cyclical nature of the Earth, and what we've had is it 5 or 6 extinction level events. We
Yeah.
have it every about 33 million years. We're about halfway through, so we're at the 13 million mark. So you're good. We're safe for a little bit, and um, people think that, oh no, if there was another civilization, we would just dig up something. And well, no, I mean, if you look at the destruction of the earth and what would happen, there ain't nothing left. There's not a lot, and we overestimate how long stuff lasts. Stuff breaks down so quickly. Nature absorbs it. And I like the theory of Nemesis, and I don't know if you're not familiar with it. It's that most star systems are binary.
Mhm.
So it's odd that ours isn't, but it's not because we think it is. We think we have a brown dwarf companion. It's not level with us. It's up at like 40 degrees. So it's even harder to find. Brown dwarfs are like really difficult to see. And that it comes back in every 33 million years, and it pulls all the crap out of the Oort cloud and everything else, and it rains fire and it rains stuff on the earth to the point where it wipes out almost all of people here, and then we come back.
Yeah.
And so it's such a fascinating thing to think that we are civilization 5 out of what was already here before, and we could have been super technologically advanced at least one of them. Who knows?
Yeah, and it wouldn't just destroy Earth, it would destroy Mars and Venus as well. Like maybe
Right.
Venus is the way it is because of this Nemesis star, or like Mars has that massive Valles Marineris trench that like could
Yeah.
not have been created through erosion. Like that was some
Yeah.
sort of
It's
massive, massive impact, whether it was a moon in the distant past or just insane asteroids or maybe,
yeah.
like some sort of plasma event that just destroyed something, like something major happened there,
Yeah.
and it maybe it destroyed civilization there. And we also like tend to assume that all civilizations are going to act like us, which is another kind of frustrating thing about the Fermi paradox because we're not sure that intelligent aliens would act like us. Maybe they would be completely different and they wouldn't build the same type of energy generations and they wouldn't use CFCs and they wouldn't do things that would be easily noticeable to the naked eye or to a telescope
Or they
that
wouldn't even care.
yeah,
They wouldn't even care to seek out new life and new civilizations
they
and to
might
boldly
not.
go where you go. Who cares? We don't care about that, really? No, we focus on ourselves. Or they don't have a governing body. There's no government, there's just family. There's just whatever. Everyone just does what they do, and that's just the way it's always worked. Like stuff like that. Or kill or be killed, and that's how we've lived for 30,000 years or whatever. Yeah. Or we don't build spaceships, we build tunnels, we build
Yeah,
this or that. And the thing that a little pet peeve of mine is when we try to apply current technology to problems that are beyond that technology. And the example I give is like in the olden days, if they tried to envision airplanes and things, they would imagine sailing ships in the sky because
yeah,
we didn't have airplanes. We're like, well, it would be like a ship, but it'd be in the sky. Okay, well, no, that doesn't work. It's not. There's something different, and it's the same thing with rockets. And God bless everything that's happening with SpaceX and everything else. But that's like a 40-year-old technology. It
yeah,
really is, and shoving people into explosive tubes is just not the way to go. I mean, we're going to come up with technology that's bending space and time or stargates and things like that where we'll be like, can you believe that we were going to put people in that thing when you just walk through here?
yeah,
So
and
I think that may be it.
even stuff like, we could be doing launch loops or space towers or orbital rings, like, there's so many different things that you could do that aren't rockets, you know?
Yeah,
And like you said, like, rockets seems to be such an antiquated idea that we need to get past. Just because they land themselves doesn't mean they're not still a rocket, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And
it's
they're
it's
not
it's
gonna
old
they're
technology.
they're not gonna help us travel through space. It's not gonna make it any easier, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
it's gonna destroy people's bodies. It's gonna be terrible,
we
terrible way to travel, and, like, yeah, man, I hope that we're capable of finding an easier way to go about it. I hope that
yeah.
we're capable of going to different planets and different star systems, and
Oh God, I would love that in my lifetime for us to crack the code on travel
yeah,
and that we do go. I would love to step foot on another planet. I would love if Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri is the way to go, and that you know that's where we find life first. I think that would be such a cool thing. It's only 4 light years away, but
yeah.
still,
And if we find
it's
life 4 light years away, imagine how much would actually be out there, you know?
right.
And,
Yeah.
like, one of the things that I find fascinating is the idea, like, there's something going on with UFOs around this planet. I don't know what they are. I don't know if it's discovered technology from
Mm.
a different race of beings from a different star. I don't know if it's old technology that a past civilization here on Earth created and then died out, or it's from Mars. Like, there's something going on. And it seems like whatever that is has been here for a really, really long time. And, thousands of years ago, we had no way to perceive like what a rocket is or what a spaceship is. And maybe they presented themselves in different ways, in angels and, spirits. And maybe those, angels and spirits evolved into flying saucers when we discovered science fiction and had a different way of looking at what these things could be. Like, there could be so many different things going on, but like, one of the frustrating things to me is when people look at it and just go, there's nothing to see here. And it's like, no, there's definitely something to see here. Even if it is the United States military that's building these things, how are they making them do what they do? And why
Right.
don't we know about it? You know,
Right.
like, and one of the an interesting theory that I think is like Eric Weinstein, who's a mathematician, has this theory what's it called? String theory is bullshit,
Right.
essentially. That
I've
it's a
seen
bunch
I've
of
seen him say that.
yeah, where it's a bunch of bullshit and it's like a
MS
boondoggle to get people studying the wrong thing so that we don't figure out the right thing. And I
Right.
think that
Right.
that is absolutely possible because string theory is an untestable theory and we're setting our best minds on an unprovable task that's going to
Right.
get us absolutely nowhere. There's no
Yeah.
way we'll ever be able to prove if string theory is real or not. And like, at who cares if there's these tiny little folded up dimensions around us? Like, it doesn't do anything for anybody, you know?
Well, so that's a paradox I deal with internally, where I'm fascinated by all the stuff, but at some point I go, who cares? Like take 8 billion steps before that and solve this problem. Like when they talk about the expanding of the universe and stuff like that, I go la 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 because and like we haven't even solved getting past gravity
Yeah,
here, or all these tasks that we need to do first. It's great that you can do that, but and you were talking about UFOs and ships and things like that. And so it occurred to me once that what if we're not the dominant species on the earth? What if we're just like, well, yeah, because we're the highest species here and we're the only ones who see.
yeah.
Yeah, but our earth is covered mostly by water.
Mhm.
And what if the dominant species lives there and they come up here once in a while for whatever it is, for surveillance, what have you, and they leave us well enough alone because we're this subspecies that's here that's very primitive, and because we're a water planet and they're water people, period, and that's it. And that would explain a lot of that stuff. The other thing is, I've never heard anyone say this theory, but this occurred to me is that what if ship sightings and all this nonsense that happens are just tourists? Like what if you look on the galactic map and they're like, yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
that's like certain street in New Orleans. You don't really go there. Don't go there, right? And but once in a while people do, and they do crash, and because they're kids and they're not paying attention. And like if they were just tourists, then that would explain it. Because we always have this grand theme in our mind that, oh, there's a huge civilization, they're sending people here and they're going to say take us to your leader. What if they don't care? What if there's just a bunch of tourists that crash here because we're not worth it?
yeah. And, the book that I'm writing explores a breakaway civilization that broke away from humanity when Atlantis fell. And, like,
Mm,
that could be a possibility. Whatever happened at the Younger Dryas, like, I'm under the opinion that the flood is real. Like, that flood happened. I was sitting out in my hot tub one night. I live here in Boise, outside of Boise in the Treasure Valley, and I was looking around and I was thinking about the geography, and I realized, I was like, "Holy shit. There's a massive underwater aquifer under Boise, under the Treasure Valley that I knew existed." And I'm looking around and I go, "Holy shit." When the flood happened, whatever happened that caused that flood, one day there was Native Americans living in this valley, having a good time, playing with their kids, hunting game, and then the next second, there was a massive wall of water, and within a couple weeks, this entire valley turned into a lake. And there was
yeah,
people here to see it, and,
yeah,
like, what could that have looked like? And I think it's so strange that mainstream, not just archaeology, but media also wants to poo poo on this theory and call Graham Hancock a kook and all these things. It's like, imagine the movie that would make. Like, that would
yeah,
be an insane movie. Like, 2012 was a cool movie, but like, this would be even better because
yeah.
it's something that actually happened.
Mm,
And it's just incredible to me that, like, people think we're so safe because we're so good with technology now, and we can build these phones and have these conversations, and they think that we're so safe from everything. And, like, one of the things that I really am scared of is EMPs from the sun. You get a big
mhm.
coronal mass ejection. We can't really, there's nothing we can do to prevent these things. They happen all the time, every day. Oh, you got something there. They happen all
That's
the
what.
time. We can see
Yeah,
them, and we're just lucky enough that we're a tiny little planet compared to a massive sun, and these things go out in different directions. But, like, the Carrington event would have done serious, serious damage to the Earth if it
mm,
happened today. And, like, we're just not prepared for any of this stuff. We don't have a backup electrical grid. If the grid goes down, we don't have the people to fix it. We don't have, just try, if everything goes out, try getting communications up and running so you can coordinate where the linemen go to fix everything. It's next to impossible. And, like, DARPA's done studies on this. They did a big study on Plum Island a couple years ago where they simulated a cyber attack. And a cyber attack is nothing compared to an EMP, because a cyber
yeah.
attack, you can fix things just, with computers or whatever. But on an EMP, man, all those transformers go up in smoke immediately, and you're back to the Stone Age.
So the Carrington event, people actually reported because they had the teleoperators,
Yeah.
they had that at the time. People were talking about lightning coming out of the wires and things like that.
Yep.
And we just missed a level 10. I think it was a level 10. We just missed a Carrington level of event because the coronal mass ejection was pointed slightly off from where they thought it was going to be. And I expected that. So my book Upside Down, which is the sci-fi of the trilogy, and again, like we talked about before, it's so hard to talk about a book where you don't want to
Yeah,
give
it
anything
is.
away.
It is.
But there, it talks about that, and I had to do a lot of research to find out what truly would happen with an event like that, including um, the fact that our poles are shifting
Yes.
and what that actually does, besides just make the compasses work upside down. But that book is more hard science fiction. The other two are more fantasy, but there's science fiction in them, and the line gets blurry sometimes. And so I was really fascinated by what it would do to civilization, along with the flipping of the poles. So
Yeah.
uh, I'm concerned with that too, and I think we get so involved in like, well, look at what we're doing now. Like we just take this stuff for granted, and the interconnectivity and stuff like that. But so people make fun of people who want to be self-sufficient, and they shouldn't, because those are the people we should look up to and say, hey,
Yeah.
help me out, help me to be self-sufficient too.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer for what happens if an event like that happens is everybody dies. Almost everybody dies. The people who are capable of hunting, the people who are living in the right place and have prepared for something, they might survive. But like one of the things that people don't really think about is like you could be the most ardent prepper in the world. But if you're at a basketball tournament 5 towns over when the thing happens, you're not getting over there.
Yeah,
All of these billionaires have their bunkers in New Zealand and all over the world, but, like, if you don't know that the event is coming beforehand, you're not getting there. If
right.
planes aren't able to run, you're screwed. What are you gonna do? Take a sailboat to your to your your underground maybe, if you've got somebody with you that knows how to sail and knows how to navigate by starlight, but short answer is almost everybody dies, and, like, the government has done studies on this, and I think it's like 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks, the power never comes back on, and like 80% of the human population dies, and
Yep.
they don't want people to know that because it would change society in a massive way if people were more aware of, like, we live in a cosmic shooting gallery, essentially. You've got the
Yep.
sun, you've got asteroids, you've got comets, like 3i Atlas just came ripping through here, and, it would be the luckiest pinball shot in the world if some, extra galactic or extra, solar,
No, you're right.
comet came in.
Extra galactic. Like there is actually. I read a paper on a cosmic event. It was a gamma ray burst cosmic event
Yeah,
that I thought it was too far away, but it would actually wipe out life on Earth.
yeah,
It would strip the atmosphere. It would do horrible things if we were within a certain, like you said, the shot of that, the
yeah.
little tunnel. So
It's
that's
kind of crazy that we're actually here. So many things had to go right, and we had to get so lucky for this
yeah,
conversation to happen. Like,
yeah.
so many
And
things.
most of that is the moon, the freaking moon.
Yes.
The amount of things that, and I just found another one. The amount of things that the moon did for us, obviously defend us against stuff. It keeps, the tides, all
Tides.
that stuff. But the moon is directly, I don't want to get too gross or anything, but the moon is actually directly connected to us procreating. If you just kind of
Yeah,
Google those
I
words
know what you
together,
mean.
you'll find something that's really kind of very personal, but very, very amazing. In that the moon could be responsible for the fact that we bred in a certain way at a certain time because we got to understand that. It's just, and it's crazy. And the fact that the moon is exactly the distance and the
I
size
know.
that makes it, right?
I
And
know.
that's also what led us to the fact that we could see, that Einstein was able to prove his theory because of the moon. Like all that stuff is just, the moon is just amazingly connected to our survival.
It
Just
is.
insane.
We're almost a double planet in a way, and,
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
don't think we've found any other planets that have moons,
We have
like,
not. No, we have
nothing
never
even
found a planet
close.
that has a moon that's what's 1/6. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's too big. Yeah, it is like a double planet.
It makes you think that, like, A, somebody put it here because they evolved the same way, right? And
Yeah,
it's like, "Hey, things aren't gonna happen right if we don't put this moon here, so
Yeah,
and
and
it's got
that's
all those weird
or the
things
hollow.
about it, it's hollow, it rings like a bell, like, the
Right.
size of it,
Well, and
the craters only they all go down to just, like, a certain depth, and they don't really go much deeper than that, almost
the
like they're
age of
hitting
the
a shell.
dust, yeah, the age of the dust is backwards. So the dust that was thrown up on the top should be older, but it's actually younger, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Just like the fixed orbit that it has, which is also helpful for us too, for us to go to the moon, because then we don't have to worry about getting out of contact and things like that. That's also makes it useful if it's a big space station staring at us.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the spinning.
Yeah.
That's helpful too.
Yeah. Do you think we went to the moon?
Wow. Um, it seems really odd that we did such a monumental thing with, the calculators essentially and transistors, and we didn't do it again. And I understand there was a space race and all that stuff. And actually, the presence of the space race kind of proves and disproves the whole theory for some people, because it works both ways. Uh, I just think that that should be our stepping stone. Instead of going hog wild on Mars, go to the moon. You got almost the same gravity. You got the same problem with no atmosphere. You got the same problem with magnetism and not having a shield. You're going to have to go into the volcanic caves and live
Yep.
there. So if you can make it on the moon, you can make it on Mars. So why don't we have a base? And there's so much stuff up there. Was it helium-3 and a bunch
Helium-3.
of, we found water and all that stuff, all those resources that we could just be mining up there if we wanted to, and it's right there.
Yeah.
But people forget how far away the moon is compared to like where we normally go.
I
It's
know.
like it's if you lay that out on the floor, you're like, wait, that's as far as we went, and the moon's over there. So
But it's
I
still
I
so much easier to get there than it would be to get to Mars if something went wrong and we had to send out, like, a rescue mission, you know what I mean?
Exactly, because it's the same distance. It's always pointed at us.
Yep.
It would be extremely easy. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
don't know why we're not doing bases, and I don't know why Elon wasn't doesn't want to go with SpaceX to the moon first and then Mars. I don't get that part,
Yeah,
because that'd be a great proving ground.
on a sci-fi note, like, I think Elon is heavily influenced by, Isaac Asimov. He
Okay.
put a
Yes.
copy of the Foundation series in that car that he launched up into space, and I
Yeah.
think he's trying to create a foundation. I think that, he thinks that at some point life on Earth is gonna go to shit and that we need to have a backup plan and Mars is it. Alistair Reynolds wrote a really interesting book, that I didn't catch it because I don't know enough about Mars to catch it, but essentially, like, this civilization on Mars thought they were living on Earth because everything had went to shit and there was no real history and people didn't know anything about the past and they'd been living there for hundreds of thousands of years, and the way I finally figured it out was that atmosphere was slowly leaking off of the planet, and I was like, "Oh, shit. They're not
Oh,
on Earth, they're on Mars," and I thought that was
yeah.
so interesting that, like, they had no idea where they were actually living, and it was a fun thing to explore, but, I'm
Yeah.
always torn on the moon like I am with faster than light travel. I always say that I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't go to the moon, and I wouldn't be surprised if we had bases on the dark side of the moon right now. So,
Yeah.
it could go either way for me, you know? And, maybe if there is something checking us out, if there's some bases on the bottom of the ocean, maybe their home base is on in the center of the moon. Maybe they've got a wormhole in there that they can travel back and forth to their planet without us seeing the radiation spikes or anything like that.
Yeah.
Who really knows? Because
Or
if
or like the Tic Tac, if you can
Yep.
control gravity, you're done. You
Mhm.
you're done. You don't have to worry about anything. You're done. Nothing's gonna bump into your ship because of the way the gravity works. And the whole Tic Tac thing was fascinating to me with David Fravor,
Yeah.
and just the way he described it, because he's like, oh, I just wanted to drive one. Like that's all he
Yeah.
cared about. He didn't care anything about aliens. He just wanted to drive one. And just the way they described it just sounded like trying to play with gravity, and because that's what would make a UAV and a UAP. You could go through whatever mediums you wanted. It'd be trans medium, and it doesn't matter because you're just moving the gravity around. It also explains why they light up in the sky, because if you're underneath one that's doing its gravity thing, it's bending the light and stuff around, so then it gets brighter. So
Yeah. I've also heard that, like, this is an interesting theory, and, like, I don't know if it's true or not because 'cause I'm not a physicist, but the thought is that you would have to shed that inertia somehow, Like, if they're clearly if there's something piloting that craft, like, you wouldn't have to shed the you couldn't shed the energy into the craft because it would just turn you into jelly. But, like, there should be I've heard, like, if there are warp drive ships out there somewhere traveling, we should see this, like, shed of inertia or shed of energy when they slow down as some sort of like gamma ray burst or something like that. And
Interesting.
maybe they've figured that out too, because these things seem to come and go. And but who knows? Maybe they hold all that inertia into some metamaterial and they go into the moon and shed it all in there, and it just absorbs into the outer shell of the inside of the moon, and they're able to convert that back into usable energy again.
Yeah, that maybe it's recycled on the ship, and it's a way to use ten
Yeah.
percent of the energy you normally would, or whatever. Yeah, I just think gravity is the way. I think gravity manipulation is the way to travel.
Yeah, it has to be. And I think it's so interesting that like the universe seems to be governed by gravity, but it's like the weakest of the forces by
Yes,
far.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
like I've always been fascinated by membrane theory, like M theory, that essentially you've got this bulk with different universes stacked on top of each other, and that it's possible that gravity exists in this bulk somewhere and it kind of just leaks through into our universe, which is why
yeah,
you only get a small portion of it because it's kind of distributed across all of these universes. And,
yeah.
it would be crushing within the bulk, but everywhere else, it's kind of just dispersed in different ways. And maybe we would go to different universes and find that gravity's different. What if you go to a universe and find that gravity is like half as strong as it is here, and it's not even strong enough for planets to form or stars to form, and you've just got this
Yeah.
empty universe full of dust and gas. Like, that would be crazy. It's kind of like not only do we live on a fine-tuned planet, but we live in a fine-tuned universe, a
Oh yeah,
fine-tuned galaxy. Like, everything about this place that we live, it kind of makes you wonder about simulation theory sometimes,
right.
because you look around and you go, God, everything is just perfect. And like
Yeah.
one of the things that bothers me about science fiction a lot at the time is like humans will go to a different planet and they find this paradise that's, oh my God, it's so much better than Earth. And like you have this a lot of people on Earth that kind of consider people to be some sort of disease, or a for lack of a better term, a virus that destroys everything that they touch. So they kind of look at Earth as like a shithole because they don't like humans and they don't like what we do. And hey, we're gonna find this other place that's unmolested by these dirty humans, and it's so beautiful and it's great and it's amazing. And it's like, no, 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 you're missing it. We live on the paradise planet. This is the paradise planet. Everything else that we can see so far looks to be a hellhole. It looks to be like Venus or like Mars, either impossible or very hard to live on. And like it's just hard to imagine like how things could have gone so right to be like I'm looking out at my roses right now, and it's like, how does that happen? How does a
Mhm.
rose come into play? Like my dog's
Yeah.
playing around in here. It's like there's just so many
Well, it's
things that
teeming with infinite life, like the amount
yeah.
of life, like you can't, that's why we have to clean all the time because you didn't even like mold and things like that because it's just teeming with such life that you can't make some empty space and it's not going to stay empty no matter where it is.
Yeah, that was the great ending of Battlestar Galactica, where Edward James Olmos, they're flying over Africa and they're seeing all the herds of animals, and he goes, "Look, this place is incredible. Like, it has more life on this one continent than all 7 of our planets did combined." And, like, you think
That,
about it that way and you go, "Wow, like, yeah, they lived in this really harsh environment where it was difficult to live, and they had to do what they had to get by, and then you come to this planet that's just a paradise, and we have it
yeah.
so good, and
If you've ever read Alan Dean Foster,
mm-mm.
he wrote a series, a Call to Arms. I forgot what, but it was essentially aliens come here and then they find humans, and then they find humans to be like these super strong. We're super strong, but we can also swim, and we're really perceptive, and we're intelligent, and like we have active volcanoes, and like they couldn't understand why humans were like these soldiers that just didn't do soldier stuff. Like we were far stronger than any of their races were. We were far faster. We could swim. We could do all these things, and the guy that they met was just some guy, like he wasn't an
Yeah,
athlete or anything. And then the fact that we had so much water and that we had active volcanoes because none of their planets would have active volcanoes because they're like, yeah, life doesn't come on a planet that has active volcanoes. It doesn't make any sense. And then the fact that we had so many species didn't make sense to them because all their planets had a very limited amount of species, and that we're just like this big zoo.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, it is pretty much paradise in that way, where we have like everything that exists and there's a habitat for everything. It's just insane.
Yeah, I remember I read a short story a while back where a human was having a conversation with a new alien race, and the humans were on the aliens' planet, and the alien asked them like, "What are the apex predators like on your planet?" And the person's like, "You're looking at them. You know, we are the apex predator." And they just kind of like, we're talking to apex predators right now. Like, oh my
Right.
god, like what did we get ourselves into? Like, we're not apex predators. There's all kinds of stuff out here that hunt us. We had to, get rid of or whatever. And like, yeah, it's a different thing, and, like, it's possible that life wouldn't exist without active volcanoes at this point because of plate tectonics and,
Yeah.
the Isthmus of Panama. Like, one of the reasons they think that humans came out of the trees, well, at the time, we weren't humans, but, like, monkeys came out of the trees and started scrounging for food was because the Isthmus of Panama closed down, which changed the Gulf Stream and changed the climate from, like, jungles to savannas and
Mhm.
made it to where we had to come out of the trees and go and forage for food and use our brains rather than just living, fat and picking fruit off of the trees all day and existing in kind of a state of bliss. Like you had to figure it out.
Yeah. We are so adaptable, it's annoying. Like to our detriment, we are adaptable. That's one of the things that we take for granted is just how adaptable we are, not only if you throw us in different situations and different climates and things, but just the way that we just, life finds a way, as
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum said. So
Yeah. When I got my first hook and my first prosthetic, I was like wondering like how hard it was going to be to learn how to use them. And I'm talking to all these really smart people that make them and everything like that. And so they build like a prototype to kind of get you to it's like a test run essentially. They do a test run first off, and they put it on me and they plug it into the computer and they're like, okay, you need to do this and that, and it'll start moving. And I start doing it, and they're like, holy crap, like all right, let's move on to cups. Let's move on to balls. And by the end, they were like, I've never seen somebody adapt to these things so fast. And then they built the hook. And the first day that I had the hook, I was able to throw and catch things with it. And
well,
it's just the thing is
because you
very
wanted to,
intuitive
yeah.
and easy to use, but also at the same time, like we're so
You
capable of adapting. And like right now, I don't use my hook very often anymore or my hand. Well, I kind of gained some weight, so they don't really fit anymore at this point. But aside from that, like like you said, we're so adaptable that I'm just capable of doing things now without thinking about it. I don't really have to think about like what I use my hook for. And, I'll just grab something and throw it like this rather than, grab it with my other. It
yeah,
just, I don't know. Our brains, like, I had a nasty brain injury when I got hurt, and like it took a while for my brain to like kind of rewire itself. And you kind of notice that things are different when you're going through it. And like I see the world in a completely different way than I
yeah,
did before I got hurt. And in a way, I'm almost a different person. There was pathways in my brain that were destroyed or injured or screwed up, and your brain kind of like rewire. It's like a construction crew, like going, "Oh, this road got
right.
destroyed because, this landslide hit and this is a bad place to have a road. So we're going to carve into this bedrock over here to where it's not going to happen again. And it's your brain's kind of doing the same thing to adapt to your new situation. And it's just fascinating.
It is. It is.
Well, Mark, I think we've covered it. I got your name right this time. I did it. I did it. I think we covered
I
it. Tell
appreciate it. I appreciate that.
Tell everybody where they can buy your books. What are you working on next? Like, give us the whole rundown of how they can follow you and listen to your podcast and all that good stuff.
So if you want to, there's two main places you can go to: Alchemy for Life. So it's, you just spell out Alchemy for Life and you put the dot just before life, and that has all my stuff that has to do with my podcast, which is almost at 300 episodes now, and my coaching and speaking and all that nonsense. And then markbradford.org is where you can go and see all of my books, pages about all my books from my trilogy, the Sword and the Sunflower trilogy, my experimental psychology books. My latest experimental psychology is called Because. It's the fundamental building blocks that prevent us from or enable us to do everything, anything, and nothing. And it's based on Freud's pleasure principle, and I call them monsters and unicorns. So that's my latest one. My fictions are The Sword and the Sunflower, which is a trilogy, which I fell in love with the characters while writing it. One of my books is called Devils in the Details, which is my first novella that I wrote, which was weird because I kept wanting to expand it, but my brain was like, no, it's as long as it's going to be. So that was interesting to write. And my latest book, well, I have a new one in my status game series. So I actually have the third status game coming out. It's actually done, and I have people already beta reading it. So that's probably a 2026 thing. I'm writing one right now, which is a sci-fi that started out to be kind of tongue-in-cheek-ish, third wall breaking kind of silliness, and that went right out the window because what I ended up writing about is one of the most serious subjects you can write about. And that's the subtext of that book. So it's really taken me aback to write it properly. So that's where I am with that. So if they subscribe to my, Alchemy for Life podcast, they'll hear all that stuff. If they visit me on Amazon, Mark Bradford, you'll see all my stuff there, especially the Sword and the Sunflower and so forth. So I also just as conversationally, I actually one of my side quests is trying to figure out how to get things done and to help people. I ended up making an app, a to-do list app,
Oh, cool.
that I released for people. And I put it in my podcast with a special code. So for the next 48 hours, literally from now, which probably by the time this airs, it'll
Yeah,
be
it'll be
long
over by
past.
then.
Yeah.
I think
So,
this will probably come
but
out
that
next Wednesday or Thursday.
Okay, so it was kind of fun to do that, but I like to dabble in that. I'm a full stack web developer along with a bunch of other nonsense that I do too. I have a pilot's license and blah blah blah. So I end up getting my hands dirty on a lot of stuff. So
You're a busy guy. I love it. I love to hear it. All right,
yeah,
Mark, it was been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully
it's
we'll
been
do this
awesome. Yeah,
again.
thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Anytime. All right. Night. Thanks for watching, everybody.